Welcome, everybody. Welcome to 2020 Women on Board Chicago. We are delighted to have you here with us this afternoon, this evening. And when before the lockdown, we started out to have this as a evening reception, everybody. So you are welcome to have a glass of wine or whatever celebratory imbibing you might want to do while you settle in for a real adventure in talking about women on corporate boards, and for many of you, what your journey will be as you are moving to corporate boards. I'm Betsy Berkemer-Tredair. I'm the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards, and I also am the owner of a retained executive search firm in Los Angeles, Berkemer Clayton. And I am so proud to be involved with 2020 Women on Boards as we are celebrating our 10th anniversary. Ever since Mally and Stephanie started this organization, whom you're going to meet in just a moment. And I wanted to highlight what we've been able to do in terms of education and advocacy and collaboration to help pave the way and build momentum for more women to serve on corporate boards. You're going to meet several women who serve on boards on our VIP panel, which is the first part of the program today. And then after the panel concludes in about 45-50 minutes, you'll be able to transfer to the second link in your calendar invitation and move into your breakout session with a specific director coach who will help you with informal coaching toward corporate boards and how you can use your experience as your advantage, as your talking points, what we like to call sound bites that you'll be able to use at cocktail parties when we can go back to receptions again, or in your business meetings, and even in conversations on Zoom, where you're talking to your contacts about your intention to serve on corporate boards. And 2020 Women on Boards has come a long way since Stephanie and Mally started in way back in 2010. And here we are in 2020. And they started this organization with the goal to reach 20%, the number of women on corporate boards in the national average by the year 2020. And with all of the education and the promoting, the collaborating, the advocating, they help to achieve this remarkable goal. But of course, it's nowhere near where we need to be. So I'm going to start off with that history and introduce you to two special women, because if it weren't for the vision of Stephanie Sonnabend, who's from Florida, by the way, originally Boston, and Mally Giro, who is also co-founder, and she's from Boston. If it weren't for these two women, we wouldn't have 2020 Women on Boards today. And frankly, I would think that the percentages would not be where they are today if it were not for them and this campaign that they started. So may I introduce Stephanie Sonnabend and Mally Giro to say a few words and share with us the statistics of where we are now nationally with our research and what you have found out this year. Stephanie and Mally.
Thank you, Betsy. It's great to be here with you all in Chicago. When Mally and I started the campaign in 2010, we launched it in Boston. 2012, we had our first national conversations on board diversity. Betsy ran the original one in Los Angeles that year. But we weren't in the Midwest. We had not yet been able to penetrate Chicago. It was a couple of years later, and we knew that we had to get to Chicago because of the importance of the city in terms of just corporate boards. So we did that, and we've been thrilled to be here ever since.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Mally, please.
Thank you. What a thrill. I have loved being in Chicago at our in-person events, and I'm really glad to be with you tonight here. What I will tell you is, when we did this 10 years ago and we said to ourselves, well, if we build it, will they come? And what we found out is you came in the tens of thousands year after year after year. And I'm so proud of what we've accomplished, Betsy, what you are accomplishing, and what we're all accomplishing, and see this grow and see these numbers increase. So thank you.
So glad. Well, Stephanie, would you like to share with us what we've achieved this year in terms of statistics, both you and Mally, please?
Yes. If we could get the slides up.
Here we go.
Here we go. Okay. So go to the next, start with the next slide.
There we go.
Here we go. Okay. So here we look at every year we track the Russell 3000 and the percentage of women on corporate boards in the Russell 3000, both for individual states as well as for the nationally, for the country. And you'll see the gray projectile here from 16% in 2017 on up to 22.6% in 2020. And just as a little sideline, the Russell 3000 was down around 10% when we started this campaign in 2010. Illinois has consistently been better than the national average. So something that you all in Illinois should be very proud of, that the percentage there has increased from 17.4 to 23.5%. Next slide. Among the top 25 states in the US, 23 of them have hit this milestone of 20% or greater women on boards. The only states that have not made it quite yet are Florida and Utah, Florida being my home state, of course. But for the first time, we have 6 states joined us for the first time. Illinois reached 20% women on the boards last year in 2019. Next slide. So we also track the what we call the W companies. Those are the companies that are 20% or more, have 20% or more women on their boards. And you can see that back in 2018, 50% of the companies, of the 132 companies that were headquartered in Chicago, had more than 20%. And that number grew to 71%. 89 companies, 89 out of the 126 companies are now at 20% or greater. And as of June 2020, there were 282 women on corporate boards that were headquartered in Illinois. Next slide. Of those, imagine that all Illinois companies were at 20% or greater. All that would it take to have that accomplish that goal would be between 49 and 61 more women joining Illinois company boards. And the difference between 49 and 61 is whether companies retire a man or add an additional board seat. Next slide. We've been tracking 2020 and looking at companies that are at 20% or greater. But having met our goal, we realize our work is definitely not done. And 20% is no longer good enough. Let me turn it over to Mally Giro to tell you now what's next.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next slide, please. So if 20% is no longer good enough, well, then what is? Well, we made a bold decision to set our new goal at parity, which we call gender balance. And we'll take the next slide. Thank you. So where are we nationally and here in Illinois? Well, nationally, 163 companies out of 2,982 have gender balanced boards, just about 5%. In Illinois, 6 out of 126 companies are gender balanced, also just at about 5%. We'll take the next slide. So our new vision, all public companies will be gender balanced with women holding half of corporate board seats. And let that be a model, not just for corporate boards, but let it be a model for all boards, private company boards, nonprofit boards, and trade and government commissions. To support this new mission, in January, we're going to change our name, and we will now be known as 50/50 Women on Boards.
Yay!
Yay!
That's virtual applause.
We'll have the next slide. Thank you. That's perfect. So we will still be committed to educating, collaborating, and advocating for change. It's what we do, it's what we know, and it's what we do best. And we'll take the next slide. And a few housekeeping items. So our very popular Get On Board workshops are going to resume in February of 2021, all virtual, powered by Zoom. Look for more information about that on our website. And can I have the next slide? And hot off the press, we're introducing a brand new program, Path to the Boardroom, developed for women in their mid-careers with ambition to serve on boards. And look for that in Q1. And we'll take the last slide. So you can find out more about our research, our campaign, our programs, and a lot more on our website, 2020wob.com, and join us in our conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Good job, Stephanie and Mally, and good job creating 2020 Women on Boards. Thank you very much. This is kind of fun because it's sort of a victory lap this year for Stephanie and Mally, and we wanted to especially spotlight them in Chicago as we move forward, not only into the new brand, but as we're celebrating with 28 events that we're putting on from today until our last event will be in New York on Friday, December 4th. And all of you who really want to, especially the end of the day when you're all enthusiastic about your journey to corporate boards, you can sign up for all the rest of the events that you'd like to sign up for.
And it's much easier getting through security.
Right. And 2020wob.com. So thank you both for all you've done. And now we're going to move into our panel. And I'm delighted to bring into our screen, and I'll announce who everybody is, and then we will break into the questions that I'm going to present. I'd like all of you in the audience to save your questions for your director coach sessions, because it'll allow us to move smoothly through our program. So, but you're welcome to chat all you'd like. And we know that the chat has really been rich and very, very energetic in all of our events so far. So let me welcome this great panel that we have on board today. And then I'm gonna pummel them with questions that are, for them, they're not difficult at all, but it's meant to be informative and educational and really push our campaign forward. And by the way, I wanted to mention that we're not a membership organization. For some of you who might ask, well, how can I join? We are a campaign, and what I would like all of you to do is make sure that you're on our database on our website, 2020wob.com, and just be part of everything that we do. But you don't have to worry about membership dues, which is probably pretty a happy message for you. So let me get right into the panel members. First, I'd like to introduce, then I'll just give everybody's names and a couple of their boards. They serve on many more boards, both public and nonprofit, but I'll just give you a couple of them. My good friend from California, who has many great influence in Chicago, Wanda Austin, Dr. Wanda Austin, and she is on the boards of Chevron and Amgen. Wanda, please do wave. And I'd like also to introduce Gail Leone. Gail is from Milwaukee, right up the road. Actually, she's in Washington, D.C. now. And Gail, we welcome her. She's on the board of Sargento Foods and Badger Meter, and she'll tell you about her pathway to corporate boards. Rodrigo Garcia, we welcome our one and only gentleman today. And Rodrigo is the Deputy Treasurer and Chief Investment Officer of the state of Illinois. You've probably known who he is, and he brings the perspective, which is critically important, of the institutional investors, since shareholders and institutional investors influence what boards do, as do ISS and Glass Lewis, of course, but they influence the decisions boards make, especially for those companies that maybe don't always make the decisions about adding women to their board on their own. We have to gently give them a little bit of encouragement, as you know. Eileen Kamerick. Eileen is a longtime friend, and she's on the boards of just two of her many boards, the Alzheimer's Association, AIG Funds, Associated Bank, and just been so great as the co-chair of this event today. And Sheila Talton, who's the other co-chair of the event today. And Sheila is on the boards of John Deere and Cisco, not the Cisco networking company, but the Cisco large organization that is a food and restaurant supplier. And she's also on the Oklahoma Utility, OGE, Oklahoma Energy Corp. So we have a stellar panel, and I'm going to start to ask them some questions. And it's going to be a conversation, everybody. This is not going to be like, what's my line? Nobody remembers that, but I think I do. So I'm going to start with Wanda. And Wanda, if you would please tell us how you got to your first corporate board and what your background is, that is the business experience that won you at that board, the first board seat.
Thanks so much, Betsy, and so glad for your success and for your leadership on this very important issue. My first board came in the area of my business, which was the space business. I'm a rocket scientist. And it was after the Challenger accident, the Challenger families, the families of the Challenger astronauts, had a nonprofit board to focus on STEM education for young kids and to talk about space and to really just have a positive legacy for their family members. And I think for many people, the path to their for-profit boards is through the nonprofits. And so I've served on academic boards, I've served on boards for the National Geographic. It's really a great way to learn and understand the governance. But most importantly, and this is what a lot of people don't recognize, is the board process is very much of who you know. When you bring someone onto the board, you ask your other fellow board members, do you know this person? And how do you get to know people? Through the nonprofit board. So volunteering and participating on something that you care about, people get to see how you show up, how you engage, to see whether you can master nose in and fingers out, because you're not management and you're not supposed to do, you're supposed to advise. And so that was the start for me. And from that, I was recommended by the fellow board members to join other boards. And it's been a terrific pathway for me as a result of that.
Fantastic, Wanda. And Eileen, let me ask you how you got to your first board. And you're
Muted.
on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow my instructions here. I was on mute. I apologize. I'd just like to also welcome, I know that you were limited in terms of how many boards you could mention, but I have friends and colleagues from the Legg Mason Closed End Fund Board who are here participating. No, that's all right. And I just wanted to add that. So I agree entirely with what Wanda said. I mean, I think that the nonprofit boards certainly provide a platform by which people can see how you perform and your gravitas, your ability to grapple with complex issues. And the first board that I was on was someone who I had worked for, who recommended me to the board because, you know, sadly he was dying of a terminal illness and wanted to make sure that there was succession, particularly on the audit committee. And so I think that kind of personal credibility and gravitas that you have with your connections and the ability to perform and to be what our former President Obama said, disagree without being disagreeable, which I think is really critical to a robust board discussion, is something that you should think about developing as a means of developing a kind of personal brand as a leader and as someone who is thoughtful and is willing to ask hard questions. So I think those connections, particularly for your first board, are very critical.
Absolutely. I think that's almost the theme of the day. Well, Sheila, tell us also how you got to your first board, and please mention, of course, that you own a very successful business. So entrepreneurs are potential board members, not just corporate women.
Thank you so much. Yes. Gray Matter Analytics is a software as a service company focused in hospital systems and health plans. And we've been around for close to 8 years. And thank you. You're right. We are successful, and COVID has been a challenge, but we've been able to weather the storm. So thank you so much, Betsy.
And
yes, like Wanda and Eileen said, First Pathway was not-for-profit. I was involved on the board of Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. And the only thing that I would add that would complement what they've said is taking a leadership role, if you can, on those nonprofit boards.
yes,
On that particular board, we were doing a capital campaign. And at the time, the CFO of McDonald's, Jack Greenberg, was also involved in our capital campaign. So your network begins to spread. And another individual that was involved in that was the CEO of Rand McNally. I was a senior partner at Ernst & Young, and some of my colleagues who were on the audit side actually knew of my technology background. And so one of their audit clients at a point in time mentioned that they wanted to add someone to their board. And my audit colleagues called me after I had left Ernst & Young and introduced me to the CEO of ACCO Brands.
and that was your first board.
It was my first public company board.
And it really does work. And you never know where that connection
Right.
is going to come from.
That's right. I was actually in China when I got the call.
Well, I don't recommend that everybody try that particular way, but right. So thank you, Sheila. Rodrigo, tell us, from the perspective of institutional investors, you certainly are a part of a network of a number of state treasurers and their investment leaders as you are. What do you look for in corporate boards?
That's a great question. So investing means making choices. Through investor engagement, we can maximize the long-term shareholder value while positively impacting the challenges facing our society. That is why we are leading a number of investor initiatives asking and promoting gender, race, and ethnic diversity on corporate boards. Just last month, we launched an initiative where we are asking companies within the Russell 3000 index to disclose the makeup of their boards of directors, inclusive of gender, race, and ethnicity, in their public proxy statements, given the correlation between board diversity and long-term performance. Usually people ask, why the Russell 3000? And we chose it because it makes up 98% of all listed public equity market. And so launched last month, this initiative now includes approximately 22 institutional investors. I believe we comprise more than $3.1 trillion in assets under stewardship and advisement. And our intent is to utilize an array of strategies, whether it's direct shareholder company engagement, proxy voting, and public advocacy, to counter what we believe is unacceptably slow pace of change,
Right.
and to ensure that diversity is a corporate governance priority. And so we will continue to push for this in these public proxy statements until we feel that there's sufficient attention that is warranted on this very important public issue. Outside of that, the only other piece that I would mention is that, we have to be intentional. We cannot also let people assume that there is an interest in these company board seats, or that everyone would be interested, or that we would just automatically be interested in those corporate board seats. So we must be intentional in making this awareness, known. And then secondly, purposely exploring these relationships. Just like many company executive roles, these opportunities are very much based on relationships.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I also want to make sure that I didn't take 2020 Women on Boards can't take all the credit for the advances that have been made for women and people of color on boards. You and your colleagues have been extremely helpful, and it's really the institutional investors that the companies listen to more than they listen to us. But so thank you so much for all that focused work and intentional effort to get this moving forward.
Of
So-
course, I know that it takes a village.
It does, of men as well as women. So thank you for that. And Gail, please tell us how you got on your first corporate board. And I'm saving Angelique for last for a reason. So Gail, please do take the microphone.
Very similar to the journey that Wanda experienced. It really came from my work on nonprofit boards. In Milwaukee, principally, I was chair of the YMCA board, which is a large operating nonprofit. And I also co-chaired the United Way campaign in the city with two CEOs, one of the largest banks in Milwaukee and the CEO of Manpower, the year we did it. And there was a very large privately held company, Sargento, that was looking for a director. And one of the people that I was on the board of YMCA with approached me, along with one of our suppliers, one of our leading suppliers at Harley Davidson when I was the general counsel there. And so it was really sort of the business network as well as the nonprofit network. And that was a long time ago. It was in 2006 when I went on the board of Sargento. And so I think, but to your point about you never sort of know where the next connection is going to come. My next board was, which subsequently has been sold. It was my dinner partner at the rehearsal dinner for my wedding of my best friend from high school in Bermuda. In Bermuda, 4 days in Bermuda. And at the end of that time, he said, send me your resume because I chair a board and I'd be really interested in having you. So you really never know where the connection is going to come. So it can come from nonprofit work, but it can also come from your, relationships you've had with people for 40 years.
Was it someone you actually knew in high school?
It was my best friend in high school, and she didn't get married until late in life. And it was a wedding in Bermuda. There were only about 40 of us. And the person who asked me to be on this board was actually the best friend of the fellow she married. So you never can tell where that's going to happen.
Too much. I just love it. I thought that you got on your first board because you rode up in a Harley Davidson and
well, actually that was critical because everybody on the board rode motorcycles. So as it turned out, we did a supplier visit on motorcycles with the entire board. It was loads of fun.
Fantastic. Well,
it was.
I can just picture that, Gail.
It was. We shocked many of our own suppliers.
And shareholders, I'm sure. Well, I wanted to especially to have Gail on the panel today because she represents being on a private company board. And for many of you women and men in the audience, serving on a private company board might be your first step. And in Chicago, an organization called PDA, Private Directors Association, has formed and now spread around the country where private company CEOs are gathering together and board members of private companies to get to know one another. So private companies, as all of you know, are not publicly held. They're owned by the family or a small group of owners, and but still many of them have boards. They don't generally pay as much as the corporate board, but they don't have
That's
to.
changing.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's actually what's really interesting. I've been on 2 private company boards and 2 public company boards, and I'm still on 1 private and 1 public. And there are huge advantages of being on private company boards. First of all, a lot of them are larger than you would imagine. I mean, if you look at Wisconsin, you've got Kohler, S.E. Johnson, Menards, Direct Supply. We have Epic runs, most of the hospital systems, huge private company boards. There's something in the water in Wisconsin that people like to stay private. But so they all have boards. I haven't looked at compensation of all of them, but they're doing interesting things and they can be strategic long-term. And that is the greatest gift. you don't have to deal with sort of quarterly, investment related pressures. You can really focus long term. And so it's a wonderful experience being on them, and it also helps you if you also want to go on a public company board. But there are huge advantages, I think.
Well, you're right, and I did want to mention again, Private Directors Association, and they are a sponsor also of our Chicago event. And for those of you in the audience who might want to attend receptions or virtual even, get to know private directors on your pathway to public, or maybe you won't be on publics. But I do also want to say to you that also Sargento cheese is delicious, and I happen to, it's part of my staple diet or protein, etc. And that's Gail's company, where she's been on the board since 2006. So I'm giving you a little commercial.
Thank you, Betsy. We appreciate that.
And I'm saving last Angelique Brunner, because she just was named to the board of Cushman Wakefield. And so she is our most recent board member. So let's applaud Angelique. She also goes by Angel, so we'll call her our Angel. And she's also one of the youngest board members to be named this year. And so I'd like to turn the microphone over to Angelique and ask her how she got on this first board, and tell us, what is your career experience, Angelique? Not the whole career, but your company.
Sure. So like Sheila, I'm an entrepreneur, and this is my second public board. My first public board I rolled off of at the end of 2019. It was a hospitality REIT, Chesapeake Lodging Trust, and it was successfully purchased right before COVID at a premium by Park Hotels. It was an incredible exit. Unfortunately, I only got to be on the board for about a year before we had a successful exit. So at the beginning of 2020, I had set a goal for myself that I had enjoyed the opportunity. I felt like I had added value. And so I went back to my board members and I said, would you feel comfortable supporting me in a new board position? And they said, yes. We had a terrific experience. It was short, and my fellow board members were, the stereotype to the T, plus 60 white males, multiple boards of service. But the interesting thing was how I got on the first board was because I had a close friend who was on the board. And when the CEO said they wanted someone with hospitality experience, he put my name in. And I did not find out that I was part of the process until I made it through to be interviewed by the senior executives. This current board that I'm on now, but in that position, I had 3 of the 5 members of the board that had either a direct relationship with me or were able to ask someone extremely close to me for whom they were extremely close with. So one gentleman who I didn't know was extremely close with one of my business partners. One gentleman had been a limited partner in a venture fund 20 years ago when I had been an associate and had remembered me from then. Positively.
Yeah.
And then one gentleman had been the first person to offer me a job when I moved to Washington, D.C. 20 years ago. I turned him down, and 20 years later, we got to work together on a board. So, what I would say is that the one rule that I've always followed is you only get to make one first impression. And every time you interact with someone, it's an interview of some capacity, either directly or indirectly. But every time you're talking to someone, you're making an impression, and you have to be deliberate and intentional with how you wish to leave them. I've been in multiple industries. I started out in public finance, and I went to venture capital, which was my dream. Wanda, it was very difficult for me to stay there because I was one of those girls that was tracked out of math and science, and I didn't have an engineering background. And so that was a challenge. And then I had moved to Washington and was incredibly morally distracted by the state of the city, and really felt like I had to be in real estate and I had to be part of the solution. And across all of them, the people who knew me really always had the same thing to say. And so that was also very helpful. In this particular board, because I had set a goal for myself that I wanted to step back onto a board, it was my first time being intentional about it. And so in doing that, I took a look at the people I knew. I took a look at the people who I didn't know, but that someone I knew. And I started making phone calls and started saying, I just rolled off of a board. I know that people are looking for talent, and I want to make sure that you guys know that not only am I interested, but that I've made professional space to serve on boards. And so I've just appointed my university president, and I have, this experience with audit committee. I have this experience with different things. One of the big drivers for me was my first board was a domestic board, but I have clients from 65 countries. And so I really felt strongly that I had global experience that wasn't being used, and that I really should be on a board that
Indeed.
had a global presence.
What is the name of your company, Angel?
My company is EB5 Capital, and we use the EB5 Immigrant Investor Program to rebuild communities. We're one of 900 licenses who are regulated by the SEC and Homeland Security. And we're the only company that rebuilds communities with the money. And that's largely what most of my press is about the company, is about how we rebuild communities.
Well, it's a fantastic story. And then specifically, and I want to emphasize for our audience, that you actually made the phone call, which is what we talk about in our workshops and our director coach sessions, that you, when you're interested, all of us interested in serving on corporate boards, especially now, you need to
I made the phone call.
Reaching out.
Yes, I made the phone call, and one of the people I called had been called for this board, and he declined and offered my name. And when the CEO called me, he said, I've got your name from 3 different people who didn't know they were each recommending you. And so I've stopped my search, and I just want us to talk. So again, I think the most important thing is, and none of these people, one person I served on the real estate roundtable with, one person I had encountered me in my volunteer work for Princeton, and then another gentleman had just heard of me and couldn't even give my name because he didn't know it. He only could describe me by my reputation. And
Great.
and so what I would say, I just think it's very important that as you go through your professional life and your personal life, that you remember the impression you want to make. I think Oprah has a nice quote about people remember how they feel around you, or, they remember the feeling, not necessarily what you said. And I think it's very, very important that you are very intentional with what impression you leave with people.
Excellent points. Thank you for that. And Cushman and Wakefield has a huge presence in Chicago, so it's very, very important to have you be here with us on this panel. So,
Angel, I really think that is sort of the motto for life.
yes,
I think it's really true. I think that's how people will judge you, whether it's boards or companies that you're involved with or whatever you're doing. I think that's really true.
it is. And
Bill.
the more people you reach out to and specifically tell them that you intend to serve on corporate boards and you're looking for the right board for you, the more this may come back at you. Just think of the opposite way. If you didn't say it to anybody, they're never going to think of us as potential board members.
No, and I was also intentional, and I said I have made space for 2 boards. So because I'm such a techie, I'm now holding space for a technology board.
Well, for a technology board. I really like the way.
So she's now told us. So
now she's told us.
Told you.
Betsy, I would like to add to that too, as well, as far as sharing that we are interested in joining a board. I also believe that it's good practice to also help others get exposed for joining boards, because oftentimes those of us who either don't have more capacity, but more importantly, we do know very capable, competent women I think it's important that we are also serving them up. And in some cases, if we do have capacity and yet you are offering up other women, that individual in that company may know or sit on other boards and you would come to mind for them at some point in the future. So also trying to help others is equally as important, I feel.
No, I would just add to that. I
As
think
you
that's
said that, thank
a
you.
huge part of using the network
Yes.
in terms of helping people. And I consider that, a major accomplishment on my part when I'm able to assist people in terms of serving on boards, and particularly women, and giving them that opportunity. This is really a networking opportunity, particularly for people for their first board. People want to have a sense that someone can vouch for you. That's very important. So if you can use your personal credibility to be able to move someone forward, that makes a huge difference. And a lot of, I think, of the advancement that we've made in this very admirable goal, and now the even greater goal that's been set by Stephanie and Molly, is really as a result of using your personal capital to try to advance the effort here and to
That's right.
advance individual women.
That's right. Let me add one point to that. When anyone turns me down that I've offered a job or I've offered something, I say, well, you have to give me the name of someone who you think would be excellent. And I would do the same. If I turn someone down for a board or something like that, I think it's very important that all of us offer up a name, because we have to, we know incredibly competent people. We're probably more likely to know outstanding women, outstanding people of color. And so we have to be part of the solution. And I'm sure a number of us, not me, but I'm sure a number of us get multiple offers. Certainly my friend who gave my name in his place got multiple offers, and he wasn't going to, he was going to make sure that he passed the torch, that he wasn't going to leave it in no.
Well, and
Well,
then
that's
goes
part of
beyond-
sponsorship, I think.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
And then
Yeah,
the
it's really important, because you have the opportunity to open the door for someone else. And many times your plate is double booked, but you know of amazing women who could easily step in and fill a particular slot, a speaking engagement, or a conference assignment, which puts them on the stage for others to see them and have some visibility. So I think that is part of what you should measure your success on, which is how many people have you enabled, helped, sponsored into rooms that they otherwise would not be in.
Bravo.
Good
And
point.
yes, and I think that's
Also,
not
yeah,
just recommending for boards, but giving them visibility in the ways that Wanda described. What are their opportunities to have people showcase their abilities and talents and be seen by decision makers and influencers? So it's not just when you get a call for a board seat, but when you think about someone in terms of speaking engagement, or some way or another that they can create their own professional and personal brand.
And
It's
I would
also
echo
about-
that as well, as being an entrepreneur, and given that one of my target markets are hospital systems, so many of my customers have been a direct referral from people that know me who happen to have relationships in hospitals.
Excellent. Well, may I ask, along this line of thinking, obviously diversity, both the gender diversity, racial diversity, diversity of thought, but we're focused on gender and racial diversity. How are companies today, your companies where you serve on the boards, or companies you're observing, how are they proactively, Rodrigo, you may also have been observing and tracking how companies are proactively reaching out to bring more women and women of color and men of color onto their boards today? Any of you, please just jump right in.
I'd like to jump in. While I'm the newest Cushman board member, I'm the fourth woman on the board.
Glad to hear that.
Leadership there was early. I am the first African American though, but I think the leadership was early to turn the corner and understand the importance of a more diverse set of voices at the leadership level for the CEO and senior management. Rodrigo, I really want to underline the importance of customer-driven outcomes. And I think that all the pension funds, and you didn't mention this, but I hope that you're banding together, because your voice is one of the most powerful voices in the sector to drive the change at the board levels that will create better outcomes. And it's a far more important voice than external advocacy and nonprofit advocacy. I mean, in any
Rodrigo,
business, the customer's voice is what matters.
Rodrigo, what would you say?
Yeah, no, I think, Angel, you bring up a great and fabulous point. You know, one of the things that I often tell folks is that corporate America doesn't not own itself. It is owned by, the populace to a large degree, whether it's through our pension plans, our retirement plans, our college savings plans, our insurance vehicles, our brokerage plans, et cetera, et cetera. And so we must, make our voice heard through the proxy voting process and corporate engagement process to ensure that the corporate boardrooms, which control executive management and set the culture and ethos for public companies as well as private companies throughout the U.S., are ensure that our voice is heard and accounted for in those rooms, just as you mentioned.
So Betsy, I would like to jump in on that because ESG is a new buzzword, which is really important on this issue, environment, social governance, where many shareholders and investor advisors are asking companies, show me, what are you doing for social responsibility? What are your diversity numbers? What's your impact on the communities? What are you doing about human rights? What are you doing about water? What are you doing about climate? And so if you are involved with a company that doesn't have a good answer here, I think that you're going to see an impact on the bottom line. And so when we talk about diversity, it's not for diversity, it's for business sake. It is good business. Your company, your boards, your management team needs to look like the customers and community that you serve. And in order to do that, you have to be, really, really enthusiastically representing the values that you say that you hold.
Right.
So on that point, just to give you a little bit of context, in 1975, 17% of the S&P 500 assets were intangible, things that you couldn't necessarily feel. In 2018, the number is 84% of the S&P 500 valuation is intangible. What does that mean? Think about things such as intellectual capital, patents, goodwill, customer relationships, brand value, and other soft assets that create shareholder value in a knowledge-driven economy. So we must evolve to understand these non-traditional financial drivers, just as Wanda was just alluding to.
So Rodrigo, I'm going to get you to come talk to my class that I teach at Georgetown Law School on strategically managing intellectual property. It's exactly that issue. I'm right now in working with a lot of clients at Dentons, but I'm a senior fellow of the ESG Center for the Conference Board. So Wanda, you're absolutely right. It's dead on. The reason I think that ESG has more legs is actually there's so many more drivers, including investors like Rodrigo, but I think it's really been accelerated because of COVID. I think has put a spotlight, and it should, on health and safety. I think the Business Roundtable statement, moving the corporate purpose to stakeholders as opposed to just shareholders. And I think that shareholder activists in general, in addition to investors, have really sort of driven it. But what's I think promising about it is that for the first time, we're not talking about silos. We're really talking about something that should be integrated into the business strategy itself. And that's why I think, as opposed to just sustainability or corporate social responsibility, which, it's built on, but I think for the first time, it has momentum in a much more integrated, focused way. And I think boards are focusing on it now because there's pressure to focus on it. And I think they should because, and I think they've learned this year with COVID, as I said, I think it's really put a spotlight on issues that had not been addressed before in this sort of integrated.
I think you're absolutely right about that on ESG, and some people haven't heard that that's a very important committee. There are standing committees on corporate boards, of course, that all of you are so aware of: finance and audit, and compensation, nominating and governance, and ESG. And in your director coach sessions, I'd like all of you to talk about, all of you in the audience, to talk about what specific experience you bring that would be value added to a corporate board. They're not going to bring you on just because you're a woman or just because you're a person of color. You have to have valuable business acumen that you're bringing to that board. And and also a vast network of business contacts, because board members do bring business contacts to the companies where they serve on, and that's a good attribute. And the theme of our show today also is about women directors during times of crisis. The experience that all of you are gaining by going through the pandemic, the racial injustice, the economic hardships that companies are facing during these incredibly difficult months, hopefully not for very much longer, but all this experience is an attribute for your eventual board service and not to be forgotten. But I'm hoping that because experience is so important to boards, that women of color, men of color, and women in general can use their experience in new ways, or that boards are looking for experience that is not just the old paradigm of bringing on CEOs, but in our experience, bringing on CHROs, cybersecurity experience, also digital marketing, and all of you have finance experience, and that's certainly a plus. So are you all saying that diversity may be enhanced, because I want to talk about more and more diversity, by focusing on experience and helping the people in our audience understand, or companies they work for understand, how to proactively reach out to people of color to be on their boards, women of color specifically?
Well, one area you mentioned briefly, cyber, but I would also broaden that to technology. Yes, there's a risk around obviously being having ransomware or malware, and from a technology perspective, but there's also a big risk for companies to be disrupted by technology. There are so many companies today that their competitors are not their traditional competitors. Their competitors are e-commerce companies that are using technology as their underlying way to enter the markets much faster and cheaper. So overall, technology, I see more and more. I have chaired, and I am chairing right now, a subcommittee around technology. And it's just not about cyber. It is really about how do we look to be a disruptor versus being disrupted.
Excellent. And are you seeing in your companies more proactive efforts to reach out to potential future directors who are women of color?
And with some of the technology skill sets and or some of the other skills that, but yes, I am. And I'm actually seeing more companies are looking to have more than just 2 women on their boards as well.
Excellent. And of course,
Betsy, I think this started with Sarbanes-Oxley, where the audit committee role really changed, and all of a sudden it opened the door to women who had been Big Four partners or CFOs. And I see that same thing happening with compensation, with technology, with cybersecurity, where there's a new demand for a distinct set of skills that opens the doors for people who may not have been considered for boards before. And I think the ability to highlight what those skills are really allows people to frankly market themselves, to be able to show what their skills are and to be able to present themselves as someone who can provide value to a board. I tell a story that a searcher once called me and said, I'm looking for a board member who's an American, who's a woman, who's an SEC financial expert, who's bought and sold oil tankers. And I said, well, that's a really narrow spec, but actually I meet it. And so there are sort of niche opportunities, and people who want to be on boards need to mine their background to think, what are things that I have done that could be in demand that not everyone else has, and to think about that and how to present them in a way that's appealing and easily found by those who are looking for board members.
So if I could just add one more perspective to this, and safety is another new area, an emerging area that people are having to think about, in supply chain, because it seemed like that's undermining businesses as well. But I want to just offer up the perspective, Betsy, that many of the boards I'm on are, 9 people. And so you cannot bring somebody on a board who has something stenciled on their forehead as you are the compensation expert or you are the cyber expert. You have to be strategic and thoughtful in what you bring to all of the conversations. Because as a board member, you can't come in and advocate in a narrow lane. You have to think about business risk across the board. Having those areas of expertise and insight and being able to ask some very deep, thoughtful questions is really key. But I think, demonstrating that you can operate at a level with the kinds of decisions that boards have to make, and you'll bring valuable insights into that boardroom conversation that otherwise may not be there. And so that's where the diversity comes in. That's where having people who are underrepresented comes in, because they literally will highlight things that the majority members would never have crossed their mind that was a key issue.
I'm glad you brought that up. And I hate to say that we're running out of time, because I would love to be talking to all of you for hours. This is such a great discussion. And but I'd like, in closing, for each of you to help our audience or answer a question about something that they don't know. What would be your guidance, your closing thought, or your call to action for women in the audience? Something they don't know, or something that might surprise them about serving on boards, or about how to get on boards that we haven't talked about today.
I'll pipe in and start. I think the one area that a lot of women don't think about when they're looking to network to get on boards is thinking about audit firms. I mentioned I had been a partner at Ernst & Young, but we all, when you're working at a company, you have an audit firm that's doing your external audit, and you may have an audit firm doing your internal audit. They are all in the boardrooms. And so you should be forthright and let them know that you are interested in doing board service. And a lot of people don't think about the audit firms.
That is excellent. And I wanted to add that the last year in California, because of the law, 200 women in 2019 were added to boards, and there will be another 600 this coming year. But 200, many of them were, most of them, not found by search firms. Most were found, just like you're saying, that the NomGov chair or the CEO calls up his CPA or his banker or his attorney and asks,
Right.
You got to have a woman on this board. We don't necessarily want one, but who do you know whom we could trust, who has the business experience we need? Just like you said, CPA, banker, and attorney. And all of you in the audience have those contacts that you've never thought about going after. Thank you on that. What else would you suggest?
I'll go
Okay,
next
Rodrigo.
if it's all right. So I would just say that be aware that opportunities come from different ways. These additional opportunities to network and establish your credibility. I would first echo what Gail said. My first company board was a private company board. And so do not underestimate the opportunities that exist as a step up to a public company board, including a private company board, a mutual fund board, a community bank board, certain charitable organizations that have paid boards, certain government boards that have paid boards, or I've even seen paid advisory boards as well. So all of these not only provide you with compensation, but the experience, the credibility, and the network as you continue on your journey to that public company board seat.
And I would add just one other thing that, of course, Rodrigo will know about as a limited partner. There's a lot of pressure being put on PE firms, as Rodrigo suggested, in terms of adding diversity to their boards. Many of those companies will go public, or they'll be bought by a company that is public. So it is an entree into the public company world. And the LPs in private equity firms who are investors are making this push towards diversity. So that's another avenue that I don't think people think about as much. But I would just emphasize what you said, Betsy. The law firms, the accounting firms, the investment banks are often the entree onto board seats. And so you never know where this is going to come from. And so creating optionality in terms of getting your name in front of them, and also be ready to explain what you're looking for and what value you would add in a very concise and compelling manner.
Excellent, excellent. Gail,
I would jump in and say, for me, after 40 years in the space business, when a recruiter talked to me, I said, I don't want to be on a defense board. I don't want to be in the space business, because I've got skill sets that are valuable in other ways. And so I end up on two very high impact, high consequence boards. One is an energy company, global energy company, and the other is a biomedical, big pharma company. And so I think it's really important to recognize that you have skills that have value in other areas other than maybe what your direct industry of experience is.
I would just like to add a humorous thing. Listen, you're now looking for a job, right? So get your resume ready. I had to watch 3 weeks go between when my name was given and when the CEO wanted to talk to me and when I could finally get my resume together because I just wasn't ready. So, because I was busy being a CEO and I kind of forgot about putting my resume together. So get it together, get feedback on it, let it collect dust on the shelf so that so you're not caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
Excellent point. And Gail?
Exactly what Angel said. You should have it ready, but make sure it has your value proposition, that you lead with that, not what your job is.
Right.
But I would say that one of the things we haven't talked about is that when you've been successful and followed all the advice of all these wonderful, smart people, and you get board offers, you got to be selective. I think you have to remember it's your reputation as well, and you've got to pick the right board. It's got to be the right culture, the right fit, and you've got to think through that because, I mean, there are a lot of boards that are out there that I wouldn't necessarily want to join. Not that they're bad, but it's just for me was not necessarily the right fit. And I just think that that's a lot of times people are not selective. They'll take the first thing that comes in, and that might not be the right thing for somebody. So if you get those opportunities, which I'm sure if you follow the advice of all these very smart people on this panel, that you will have those, but think through that.
Excellent point to end on. And I'm going to take CEO's privilege and share with you. You talk about resumes. This is my book, Winning the Board Game. And I put my website in the chat in case you'd like to get a copy because it lays out all of the elements of your board profile, etc. And in our Get On Board workshops, which start again in February, and we do a whole year's program for our Get On Board workshop. So we give very specific direction on not only board profile, but also your LinkedIn profile, which has to be really looking good, women. And because research firms do look at LinkedIn, we do. And everybody on the board non-gov committees look at LinkedIn. And this is new development really since LinkedIn rose to the top of being a professional network. It's very important that your profile is up to date and you also include your prior board experience, nonprofits as well, and you have a professional picture on there. So I'm going to save all the other comments for your director coach sessions this afternoon. And I'd like to thank Stephanie and Mally again for being our terrific leaders and launching 2020 Women on Boards 10 years ago. We've got 10 years ahead of us where we're going to definitely get to gender balance. We don't know when, we don't know how soon, but we're going to get there. And I want to thank our leadership committee in Chicago and our co-chairs, Eileen and Sheila, and our project manager, Julie Edwards, and all of our sponsors who've been so helpful in building this Chicago event, and all of you fantastic panelists, Rodrigo, Wanda, Sheila, Gail, Eileen, Angelique, and continued good luck to you. And so what happens now is we're going to take just a 3-minute break while we all exit this webinar and we move into our breakout sessions to which you are assigned. And you should all have a calendar invitation with a second link. You had the first link to the webinar. Now you have the second link to your breakout session. We will not be coming back to the webinar. We're saying goodbye now. Sadly, we'd like to be talking all afternoon, but your director coaches will say farewell. Please stay in touch with 2020 Women on Boards. you're be able to know what's going on with these fantastic leaders who are on our board. And we want to track all of you by your telling us when you get on a corporate board, what progress you've made, and to support the campaign as we continue to build great momentum. This is our time, and it's the best time in history for diversity and for women to get on corporate boards. Don't forget, it's the best time, and now is when you need to start working on it. Even if you don't get on a board for 10 years, you're gonna someday get 10 years older, even though you don't believe it, or 20 years older, you may as well end up on a corporate board if you do all the right things right now. So that's my message to you. Thank you, panel. Sure appreciate it.
You.
What great fun. Wonderful. We'll see you in your.
Thank you, Betsy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Alfreda, thank you very much.